Hello everyone, I wish you a good day, a good afternoon and a good evening. Welcome to the spUN Virtual High School Debate Tournament 2025 for June 7. Judge Andrew Dudowitz will be giving us feedback and announcing the winner at the end of the debate. Andrew Dudowitz graduated from the University of Michigan and has judged the spUN debates for the last 2 years. He recently completed an honor program in political science, where he researched how automatic regimes interact with political protesters. By judging these debates, his goal is to engage students from all over the world in conversations about the space industry and space exploration. Judge, please be sure to record your information in tabroom.com as soon as possible after this debate, so that teams can be advised of their next debate status. I am the moderator and facilitator for this 2025 spUN tournament room, and my name is Mona Tanco, and Isabella Lopez is assisting. I would like to read the following statement to you. The winning team is chosen based on their skill and effort, not on any preset NSS position. NSS clearly believes that humanity should continue to explore, develop, and settle space. However, NSS also believes that open and honest debate will facilitate that goal. It is important that space advocates understand and are able to express the anti-space case. No statement by any debater or coach is an official position of NSS. So let's meet our debaters. The affirmative position is held by Team Iron. The asteroid's 12 Psyche is believed to contain 1.7 times 10 to the power of 19 kilograms of nickel iron, which could supply the world's production requirement for several million years. A small portion of the extracted material should also be precious metals. The team is coached by Coach Eric Odo. Eric Odo is a social studies teacher at Niles West High School in Sauchy, Illinois. He has coached debate for schools within the district for the last 14 years. He holds 3 master's degrees, a Juris Doctor, and a Bachelor of Arts in Philosophy and Political Science. He loves to travel the world and meet people from different cultures. This is second year preparing students for the spUN debates. Team Iron, please give us your name and the country you are representing.
Hi, my name is Bogdan and I'm representing Romania.
Hi, my name is Dinesh and I'm representing the UK.
Hi, my name is David and I'm representing Romania.
Next, we'll hear from Team Aluminum. Asteroids contain valuable resources like precious metals, platinum group metals, and base metals, aluminum, silicon, and iron, making them potential targets for asteroid mining. This mining could provide raw materials for in-space use and potentially return to Earth resources, potentially reducing the strain on Earth's resources and boosting space-based industries. The team is coached by Coach Mohammad Badawi. Mohammad Badawi is from Aleppo, Syria. For several years, Coach Badawi has served as a coach for both the high school and university NSS spUN debate program. He has debated in various debates formats, participating in more than 100 debates in various roles. He was a semi-finalist in the first University Debates Championship in Syria 2022. The debate coach for public speaking and argument articulation with Shebab Center, Syria, for around 30 participants. Team Aluminum, please give us your name and the country you're representing.
Hello, my name is Radesh Alexander and I'm representing Romania.
Hi, I'm Yadunandan and I'm representing India.
Hi, I'm Marika Pescosoldo and I'm representing Italy and North Macedonia.
If anyone has any questions, please raise your hand in our participants icon on your screen. Please mute your mic unless you're speaking, and only the presenting team and judge should turn on their videos unless directed by the moderator. Our debating format today follows the same format as in the practice tournament. So let's get started. The 2025 spUN High School Revolution is: an international body should establish a framework for the utilization of space minerals. We'll hear from the first speaker from Team Iron, representing the affirmative position. Team Iron, your first speaker may begin your affirmative intro. You have 4 minutes.
Can everyone hear me well?
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna start in 3, 2, 1. Honorable Chair, respected judges, and esteemed opposition team. Today, the affirmative stands in strong support of the motion on international bodies to establish a framework for the utilization of space minerals. We believe this is not only feasible but essential. Without such a framework, we risk chaos, inequality, and irreversible harm in a domain that belongs to all humanity. Let us be clear. We are not calling for some abstract utopia. We are calling for a concrete, enforceable set of rules built through diplomacy, backed by cooperation, and strengthened by global leverage. 1. The absence of regulations leads the conflict and exploitation. At present, there is no binding, enforceable global rulebook for mining in space. The Outer Space Treaty of 1966 prohibits national sovereignty over celestial bodies, but is silent on commercial extraction. In this vacuum, some countries have unlikely passed laws granting private companies the right to mine asteroids. That's not innovation, it's annexation through loopholes. Without a neutral international framework, we will soon see conflict claims overlapping, missions, and possibly armed disputes over territory or resource access. As we've seen throughout history, from colonial land rushes to seabed mining, unregulated frontiers always lead to chaos and exploitation. This is our chance to write the rules before that happens. Yeah, yes, enforcement is possible through diplomatic and economic pressure. The opposition may argue that countries will simply ignore the rules, but that ignores how international frameworks actually function. The power of such a body lies not in military force, but in legitimacy, reputation, and leverage. If a country breaks the agreed upon space mining rules, it would face consequences, diplomatic isolation in multilateral organizations, loss of access to international partnerships such as joint missions or shared infrastructure, economic penalties, including trade sanctions or exclusion from markets relying on space-deprived resources, reputational damage which deters investors and technological cooperation. This is how enforcement works. It's in global aviation, in nuclear treaties, and in trade regulation. Countries care about their standing, their alliances, and their access to global systems. No major spacefaring society can operate in a vacuum, especially in space. A framework is the only way to prevent a space oligarchy. The opposition warns that early rules will lock out developing nations, but the reverse is true. Not regulating locks them out permanently. Right now, only the wealthiest states and corporations can afford to launch missions or mine asteroids. If we wait, they will entrench dominance and monopolize space assets. A framework allows for shared data and knowledge, narrowing tech gap, equitable licensing so early actors don't hoard prime mining zones, revenue sharing mechanism to fund developing nations' space programs. This isn't idealism, it's design. Just as we created the International Telecommunication Union to ensure spectrum access, we must now build a system that ensures the resource access is fair, not dictated by first movers. The framework we propose solves the major issues: enforcement of rules, fair participation, trust and transparency, and preventing war. The second speaker from the affirmative team will compound and explain the proposed structure of the framework and how it solves all these problems. Honorable judges, space is not the backyard of billionaires or battleground of great powers. It is the next chapter of human civilization. The only responsible way to enter that chapter is with a shared framework, one that ensures peace, protects the environment, and includes all nations, not just the powerful few. The affirmative teams offer a path, a framework based on cooperation, backed by real-world tools of enforcement, and designed to secure equity and sustainability. The alternative, delay and disorder, leads us into a race that we will all lose. We urge you to vote for the affirmative team. Thank you.
Now we begin a 3 minutes prep time for the negative team to prepare a cross-ex. If the negative team is ready to move on before the 3 minutes has elapsed, please indicate to me and we will proceed. Speaker -1 of Team Aluminum, please begin your 2 minutes cross-ex on affirmative 1.
Okay, thank you. So my first question for you would be a yes or no question, and it's the following. If the major powers like the US, China, or Russia do not join this proposed international body, can that body realistically impose any binding regulations on them? Yes or no?
Yes.
Then please name one historical example where this has actually worked with world powers on space regulations.
Well, I can't exactly name a historical event, as this is a first-time event. We have never been capable of space mining, and we are still not necessarily able to do that on a large scale. And as this is a first, I believe that if a large majority of all the other countries corroborate, they would be able to enforce a structure that would be beneficial for them and would make in the end all the nations join, because Russia, China, and Russia are already working against each other. And I don't think that if all of the countries are on one side and these three are on the other side, also competing against each other, it will work for them better than for the other ones.
Major powers do have divergent interests when we talk about space. So how are you going to convince the major powers to accept what they refuse to accept, for example, in the Moon Treaty?
Well, major powers will, this will be all a negotiating piece before. It's not going to be that one country is going to come and dictate everything. It's going to be an agreed upon treaty by all countries, and they will negotiate and be able to come to a resolution like the United Nations agreements. A resolution can be found if there is
how can you be so sure that all the major powers will join your body? Because as I said, they have divergent opinions and interests.
Well, yes, that's what I said earlier, that they have divergent opinions and interest, and they can't all be fighting each other.
Thank you. And now your opening argument, speaker -1 of Team Aluminum for 4 minutes. You may start.
Okay, just 1 second to set my timer as well. 2, 1. Greetings, esteemed members of the debate committee, timekeeper, judge, and colleagues from the opposing team. An institution next to another institution which was supposed to do what the first one failed to do, but this one doesn't succeed either. This proposal dangerously resembles the well-known practice of international bureaucracy. When you fail to make an institution efficient, you create another one identical and parallel to the first one. That is not coordination, it's confusion. And in space where technological progress is rapid, and the risks are high, a redundant, duplicative bureaucracy is a luxury we cannot afford. Now I'll begin with giving our own definitions. Framework means a set of binding rules established at the international level on how space resources are extracted, processed, and used. Use of space minerals includes the entire chain of activities: extraction, transport, processing, storage, and economic exploitation. Even if the affirmative team says that it does not decide who is allowed, but only how, the reality is that the rules about how are filtered. Only large actors can afford to comply with complex international standards. Small actors, innovative companies, or developing countries are excluded. Moreover, the space sector is in its infancy. If we impose rules too early, we risk stifling exactly the innovation we want to see. You don't impose global rules in the midst of experimentation. What technical regulations and procedures can this body come up with when we don't even know what technologies we will be dealing with? This means that, like the previous attempts, the Outer Space Treaty, the Moon Agreement, vague and inefficient regulations will be issued again. It is like regulating air traffic before inventing the airplane. For example, the Outer Space Treaty, although well-intentioned, it is full of ambiguities. For example, the first article refers to the interest of all mankind, but does not legally define this interest. Imposing an international framework now means assuming that we know exactly what the industry will look like in, I don't know, 10, 15 years. This is unrealistic, and worse, it may become an obstacle when reality turns out to be different. An international body only works if the major powers recognize it and respect its rules. But in space, as I said, these powers, the US, China, Russia, have divergent interests. You cannot force a state to adhere to a treaty. And if the most active players do not adhere to or respect the framework, then the whole mechanism becomes decorative. It's like a law that applies only to those who do matter in the power equation. No company will comply with rules imposed by a powerless body, especially if the state they belong to do not recognize that framework. For example, the Moon Agreement on Space Resources. The reason they don't want an international body to tell them how to operate in a strategic field. The same will happen with the proposal in today's motion. It will be ignored by precisely those who matter the most. The affirmative team argues that we need international regulations, but we already have mechanisms such as UNOSA or COPUS that allow for coordination and information exchange. Instead, what we can do is to build as exists in line with the emerging technology. This motion risks stifling initiative, creating enforceable rules, and offering only the illusion of cooperation that cannot exist because it is being imposed at the wrong time. Wouldn't it be a mistake to send bureaucratic inefficiency into space instead of universalization? I would also like to draw the attention to draw the affirmative team's attention to the fact that this is an implementation motion, should establish a framework. The affirmative team was supposed to present a concrete plan as required by the motion. Instead, they didn't even brought any definitions. This should have been done by the first speaker, as it is stated in the NSS SPUN debate format. From this point of view, the affirmative team does not have a viable.
Thank you. Now, affirmative 1 from Iron. Please start your cross-X on -1. You are allotted 2.
Yes. Wait a second. Okay, so I'm gonna start now. This is a yes or no question. Do you believe laws should only be created after problems occur?
Laws should be created when the technology
yes or
is
no
well
question.
known.
Yes or no question. Do you believe laws should be?
It is it's
only
more
created
complex than a
after the
yes or no
problems?
question. So my answer is that laws should be created when technology is already known by us.
So by your logic, we shouldn't have traffic laws until after the first crashes, or fire codes until after the first buildings burn down.
No,
Am I right?
we should have laws when we have the airplane. When we create the airplane, to follow your logic, then we should have regulations on how to use it, but not before, because we don't have an idea of how that airplane would look like.
Well, yes, but laws can always evolve. Is it easier to build fair rules when everyone is still at the starting line, or when some countries already dominate?
How can you convince you didn't stated how you can convince the big powers to respect those rules? So the small ones are going to be the only ones who are going to respect them. So again, they're going to be even more in this disadvantage.
Okay, so you didn't answer my question. So
yes, I did answer the question.
Wouldn't waiting only help the richest space actors enrich their power and write the rules themselves?
You weren't able to tell me how you were going to make those big powers to join this body. So my answer for your question is the same as your answer, because you forgot to, or you didn't have any arguments to tell me how international big powers can join a body.
I did tell you that.
There's not gonna be any difference with your international body.
Yes, I answered that question and I gave you arguments. If we wait until asteroid mining becomes routine, how do you plan to reverse the damage, whether environment, legal, or political?
Thank you. Affirmative 2 of Iron now offers the second argument of the affirmative team. You have 4 minutes.
Honorable Chair, esteemed judges, and respected opposition. Today, I proudly continue our case for the affirmative. The motion before us is about building a peaceful, fair, and sustainable future in space through a global framework. We affirm the motion, and international bodies should establish a framework for the utilization of space minerals. Let me take you through the 4 key reasons why such a framework isn't just desirable and it's actually essential. Legal uncertainty will lead to conflict. Right now, there is no global agreement on who owns space mineral. The Outer Space Treaty is outdated. It doesn't cover private mining or commercial use. Already, countries like the US and China are targeting the same regions on the moon. With no dispute resolution mechanism, any accident or disagreement could escalate to war. We've seen this on Earth. Why repeat it in space? A framework would prevent that. It would provide clear, enforceable rules to manage ownership, resolve disputes peacefully, and preserve space as a shared domain. Peace needs predictability, and a framework provides it. Without rules, the rich will own space. The space economy could top $1 trillion by 2040, but only a handful of countries currently have access to it. Without regulation, space becomes another playground for the powerful. Low-income countries will be locked out forever. A framework ensures universal access. Think of it like the law of the sea or the UN. All nations, regardless of their size or their ability, get a vote and a voice. Sharing data, technology, and benefits level the playing field and uphold the spun model's core value, universalization. Legal certainty attracts innovation. Companies like Planetary Resources failed because there were no clear rules. Investors won't gamble billions on legal grain zones, but when rules are clear, innovation flourishes. Just like in trade or nuclear energy, regulation builds trust. A global framework would set transparent and fair ground rules, which is exactly what businesses and governments need to collaborate, invest, and innovate safely. The framework will be transparent, fair, and self-enforcing. Let me now explain how the framework will work. It will function like the UN, open to all nations, with decisions made by voting and not dominance. Transparency will be guaranteed through a blockchain-style public record system. This is used currently by cryptocurrency, and almost all cryptocurrencies use the blockchain method. All member states will have access to the same data, so no secrets, no lies, and therefore no loopholes. Enforcement will be passive but effective. Countries that break the rules won't be met with weapons, but with exclusion, loss of access to resources, information, and collaborative missions. This prevents countries from going in their own way, and it prevents the utilization of weapons. The incentive to join is strong. Countries inside the framework will gain access to shared technology, mission data, and influence over global decisions. Refusing to join means falling behind technologically and economically. Access to share, we can't force countries to join, but we can incentivize them so powerfully that it becomes irrational not to. The framework provides shared research data, cooperative missions, and dispute resolution, and pooled funding, things no single country, no matter how rich, can access alone. This structure solves all major and visible issues: enforcement, fair participation, trust and transparency, preventing of war, and universal access to knowledge and a resource. If you're outside the framework, you're alone. Inside, you benefit. The framework is not about control. It's about cooperation with real working examples to draw from. These models the model proves that large-scale international frameworks can work even in domains as vast as complex as the ocean, nuclear energy, and global skies. There's third speaker from affirmative, which will also be me, I will provide us with the rebuttal and with reinforcement to the proposed structure by highlighting how this structure will inhibit conflict and stimulate innovation. The question is simple. Do we leave space to chance, chaos, and conflict, or build a future where space belongs to all of us? Vote for clarity, vote for fairness, vote for peace, and vote affirmative. Thank you.
Let's now hear -2 of Team Aluminum in a 2 minutes cross-examination.
So, do you think that like the technology for space mining exists? Yes. It's an yes or no question.
No.
So you're saying that we frame policy for something that is still in its developmental stage? Still yes or no?
No.
So, but we don't we humans usually develop the technology before we actually frame regulations for them? This is also an yes or no question.
Can you repeat the question, please?
But don't we humans usually develop the technology before we actually frame regulations for them?
No.
Okay. Let's assume that even if we establish a framework, do you think that all of space actors would accept it?
Yes, very much.
Very much. So you're saying all of them will accept it, all of the space
Yes.
actors.
Yeah.
So aren't you thinking like kind of utopic that all space actors have the same interest?
I agree with you. All space actors don't have the same interests, but the incentives and the possible positives that come from being part of the framework is more than just being able to do what you want. Funding is not something one country can provide for themselves forever. Food fundings will make innovation even faster.
So what you're saying that is that all of the actors will follow a framework if they have the proper funding.
No, that's not what I'm saying. They will all join the framework because the framework provides proper funding and because it provides shared information and technology. So countries don't have to have their own missions costing billions just to find something that was already discovered a decade ago.
Can you name an example for this?
An example for a framework, you ask, right?
No, an example where all of the actors.
Thank you.
Okay.
Let's hear from -2 from Team Aluminum for your second argument. You are allotted 4 minutes.
Starting in 3, 2, 1. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Imagine designing traffic laws before the invention of car. That's exactly what we risk by creating global framework for the space mining today. Scientific uncertainty and technological immaturity dominate the field. Asteroid composition is still a black box. Spectrometry shows surface metals like aluminum, nickel, and iron, but the subsurface remains unproven. Density estimates for mining targets vary by over 40%. For instance, asteroid 2001 CC21 has conflicting mass and composition models. Over 1.1 million asteroids have been cataloged, but fewer than 30 have been closely studied by spacecrafts. So what I'm saying is that without enough data, we cannot design rational extraction systems, let alone write policy for them. Drafting policies based on guesswork, not evidence, leading to misaligned incentives or unsustainable practices. Even the Moon 3D was framed after all of the Apollo missions took place. Writing a framework governing aspirations, not founded in reality, will lead to exhaustion of money, earth resources, and time, without reaping the supposedly envisioned the benefits. Despite advances in space exploration, critical space mining technologies are still in its development, especially those related to technological readiness level, or TRL, which is the measurement of maturity of technology. It ranges from TRL 1, which is basic research, to TRL 9, which is full-scale operational deployment. Let me explain. The asteroid and anchoring and drilling is still in its TRL 3 to 4, which is still lab concept or validation, which means that it is still in its early stage of research, but no system has yet been proven to anchor onto or drill an asteroid in actual space conditions. In situ resource processing, which is still in its TRL 2 to 3, which is mostly theoretical or simulated. There have been no demonstration of ISRO processes working autonomously in space. Third, bulk transport of ore to Earth, which is still in its TRL 1 to 2, not demonstrated even in prototype. No prototypes or viable systems have been built or tested for transporting bulk ore across space. The process would require massive energy, precise trajectory planning, and novel re-entry shielding, none of them which exist in workable form today. It is still in its basic research phase. Only TRL 9 technology is in prospecting and spectrometry. Example, NASA's OSIRIS-REx and Hayabusa 2 of JAXA. No known tech yet achieves full cycle mining and return. So what I'm saying in this argument is that you cannot regulate an industry that does not technically exist yet. Frameworks based on immature tech risks locking in flawed assumptions. A technology that is not fully ready is not compatible with creating a framework because there's no clear understanding yet of what needs to be regulated. Both USSR and US actually went to the moon in the 60s and 70s before trying to come up with the Moon 3D in 1979, before the Apollo missions took place, and still have not been ratified by the USSR or the USA. And the Apollo missions wasn't TRL 9, which is that they sent humans to space 6 times. My third argument is going to be adding layers of international bureaucracy to space mining could create delays, disputes, and hinder scientific technological progress. As space technologies are still developing, premature regulation might lock and flawed assumptions and slow down innovation. A rigid framework risks becoming a tool for powerful nations to enforce dominance or even justify the use of force in space. At the same time, many national governments are moving quickly to create legal frameworks that reduce uncertainty and support economic scientific advancement. It may take 20 to 30 years to reach a viable framework. Countries like the US, Luxembourg, and the UAE are building legal clarity to prepare for
Thank you.
future space activity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Team Iron, please start your 2 minutes of acrostics to -2 optimal luminum.
Okay, you said that a framework would take 20 to 30 years to build. So if it takes that long, wouldn't starting early or now actually be the most responsible thing to do?
You can't build a framework for that for a thing that doesn't exist yet. We still don't have any space mining technologies yet.
Well, if we wait until tech is ready, we'll be behind on the legal side. Can you justify delaying essential groundwork?
If we frame if we establish a framework now, we might risk in a way risk stifling innovation and other development.
Well, the framework I talked about, or the affirmative team talks about, doesn't really stop innovation, but it only controls what the technology can do, right?
But we should adapt gradually so that
Okay, I'll move on to the next question. You mentioned that space mining tech is still in its development. So if no one is mining it, isn't now the perfect time to plan fairly and avoid conflict that might appear later?
I think I've already answered your question with an example. The Apollo missions went to space and came back with crew members on it, and the Moon Treaty was signed after the Apollo missions, not before it.
Okay, you also argue that there's no proof of working technology related to space mining. So why are you assuming regulations will slow down innovation when innovation hasn't even been scaled yet?
It's exactly what I'm asking. Even we don't even have the tech yet. Why frame an regulation now?
Thank you. We begin a 2 minutes prep time for both teams to prepare their rebuttals. -3 from Team Aluminum. Please give your rebuttal in your 4 minutes of time.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, as we look forward to the future of space exploration and legalization, the question arises, do we need to establish a new international framework to regulate the utilization of space resources? Well, we argue that a new international legal regime is not useless, but also premature, harmful, and scientifically unfounded. In fact, the affirmative team mentioned more time that the system needs to be fair. So he said fair, fair, fair. And he also mentioned the UN. Well, the UN is not fair. The UN has a body of 5 countries that have a veto power, which is definitely not fair according to the definitions of fair that we have already given. So this doesn't agree with the definition of fair, and it will not allow every country to be part of it equally. Another question, however, that the affirmative should answer is, why do we need a new framework? We already have so many frameworks and they could just be developed. I mean, there's institutional memory, and hence we could foster more effective international cooperation if we have already this global legitimacy and institutional experience of different corporations. So we don't need at all. It's useless. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of resources. It's a waste of energy, and it's a waste of money having a new framework when you already have so many developed. And as I mentioned, institutional memory could rather help us in building stronger frameworks. And once again, they have mentioned that this framework would be an oligarchy. Well, this is not true. Or actually, having a framework would be an oligarchy, because the countries that have greater infrastructure, capital, and technical access will exploit the resources first. Obviously, it comes with a straight connection that the greater powers will be the great extractors. Therefore, if we have these major powers that are running towards asteroid, are running towards the moon first, then once again, they will be the one eventually using this framework, but it will not be fair if we come back to the definition of fair that were given first. So I invite the affirmative team actually to give a definition of fairs that aligns with their framework. So I invite once again to answer why we should establish a new framework if you have already so many, when we could actually develop already the ones present. They should give us a definition of fair, because otherwise we could never reach a compromise here. And the definition of oligarchy, because for us, for our team, oligarchy means the greatest powers being the leaders of the framework they've been mentioning. And on the legal aspect, we also know that from Article 6 of the Outer Space Treaty in 1976, this sets out that states are accountable for all space activities conducted by government and non-state parties. This means that even non-state actors like SpaceX or Astroforge are bound by national regulations themselves. And we have also the Luxembourg Agreement, the Space Resources Law of 2017, and this enacts that commercial space is actually possible and can be regulated. And they have already regulations. We don't need new ones. We can develop from the ones already present. So once again, I invite to answer that question. And the Artemis Accords. From the Artemis Accords, we know that to be an international framework, it doesn't need to involve all countries. That is true. But what is also true is that it needs to include those countries that will be the principal extractors in the future or in the near future, meaning that according to the Artemis Accord, US, Japan, UK, Brazil, South Korea, and Italy are already part of it. And we already have the framework we are searching for. We just need to proceed and develop it. No new established framework should be created. Waste of time, waste of resources. I repeat once again, these are the pressing issues that are the core of our whole defense here. And we also know that the highest profile attempts were sent out in 2016.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Affirmative 3 of Iron, now give your 4-minute rebuttal.
Today, I rise as a third speaker from affirmative to respond directly to the claims made by the opposition. The motion before us is clear. An international body should establish a framework for the utilization of space minerals. The negative team has not explained how having no framework will prevent conflict, but strongly oppose our idea of a framework. The opposition argues that we should wait, that any attempt to establish rules now will be premature, but in doing so, they fail to explain how not having a framework will avoid conflict. In fact, history shows us the opposite. When there is no structure, the powerful take control and the rest are left behind, just like colonial land grabs or unregulated arms races. Ungoverned frontiers invite conflict. The opposition gives us no mechanism, no safeguard, and no enforcement model to prevent this. They simply hope peace will happen on its own. But hope is not a policy. Prematurity is not a valid excuse. Rules must come before action. The negative two speaker argued that regulation is premature because technology isn't ready yet. But this logic is dangerous. Traffic laws were created before highways were full of cars. The Moon Treaty came after the Apollo mission. Delay does not prevent disorder, it creates it. As Affirmative 2 explained, creating laws affect after the fact waste time, money, and often leads to chaos. Waiting until technology is perfected or extraction begins means allowing a free-for-all when it matters the most. Countries and private companies can manage and drive through loopholes faster than we can actually develop it. So it has to start from now, from the ground up, so we have something to base off of in the future. They say we can build a framework around concepts that are theoretical, but isn't that exactly why we need a framework? So that once the technology is developed, we know why it will be used and how it will be used responsibly and equitably. Regulation isn't an obstacle, it's a preparation. Unfairness. A fair system is one where every country, regardless of wealth, has a voice. The opposition also raised fears about fairness, citing the UN veto powers as proof that international bodies become oligarchies. But our proposed framework would not follow the UN Security Model or Security Council model. Instead, it will be built on equal representation, public transparency, and mutual benefit. Let us define fair clearly. A fair system is one in which every stakeholder has equal access to decision and resources, where the stakeholders would be our main countries, regardless of their size or status. The affirmative team believes that fairness is not just about equality or of outcome, but equality of voice, inclusion, and opportunity. That's why this framework would guarantee. This is not about bureaucracy. It's about avoiding chaos before it begins. Negative two worry that the framework would create bureaucracy and slow innovation, but they ignore the lack of regulation has already slowed space mining. Take the case of planetary resources, as mentioned before. As I explained before in my affirmative two speech, this company failed in part because investors lacked confidence in the legal environment. Without legal certainty, risk is too high and innovation stalls. A framework would provide the clear rules, shared data, and global trust, accelerating and not hindering development. On the claim we don't need regulation made by the negative three speaker, the opposition claims that we don't need new regulation, but this is exactly what history warns us against. Existing treaties like the Outer Space Treaty are outdated. They were signed before private companies entered the scene, before the moon South Pole became a contested site, and before $1 trillion space economy emerged. Saying no new rules is like refusing traffic laws after inventing cars. Without modern regulation, there are no systems for ownership, dispute resolution, or equity. The absence of rules doesn't prevent chaos, it guarantees it. We don't need regulation for the sake of control. We need it to keep peace, protect access, and prevent monopolies. Our framework prevents war, builds trust, and ensures equity. Finally, the negative team questioned how our framework would actually function. But as I said in my affirmative 2 speech, made it clear, our model ensures transparency through public access to data, like the blockchain systems. Cryptocurrencies use it, everyone has access to it. You can't really make a cryptocurrency transaction without everyone else knowing about it. It's how it prevents.
Thank you. We begin a 2 minutes prep time for both teams to prepare their summaries. Let's now hear from -4 for the 4-minute summary.
Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, today's debate is centered on a fundamental question. Should an international body establish a framework for the utilization of space minerals? From our first speaker, we have led you through a process of understanding of why our team responds negatively to this resolution, and it believes that establishing a new framework is useless and economically harmful. However, before starting, I want to punctualize that we never said not having regulations, as affirmative 3 has said. We said that we don't need to establish a new framework because we can drive from the ones already present. The affirmative team seems not to be listening to what we actually say. The affirmative team was supposed to present a concrete plan as required by the motion during the first speech, and the only answer they could give us to us was the name of an institution already present, UN. They said they would drive conclusions from there, which to me actually sounds like development from an already present institution, not establishing a new one. Because if you say, oh yeah, we should do this like the UN does, then it's building up on the UN. It's not creating a new one. Otherwise, you would just to copy and paste. So the only answer they could give us is the name of the UN and trust. They said, yeah, we could create trust in these smaller countries, in the more developing countries, and show them that they would actually need to be part of our framework because it would be effective. Well, trust is not a solution when there is no evidence for them that it will be productive to them and that it would actually be effective and give something back to them. The UN Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space, which is actively exploring legal models, is already a framework addressing space resource governance. Simultaneously, countries like Luxembourg are advancing national policies and investments, such as the Resources Law in 2017, to support the space sector. Creating new institutions risks fragmenting international efforts and causing legal uncertainty. Team Aluminium believes strongly that it is more effective to reform and strengthen existing bodies like the aforementioned, which already hold global legitimacy and institutional experience, leveraging on institutional memory. Premature regulations risk stifling innovation. The space resource sector is still in its infancy, and imposing global rules too early could deter investment and limit progress. As of 2025, no robot has fully autonomously mined, repaired, or processed materials in space, performing complex industrial tasks on its own. Creating legal frameworks without a foundation in effective and functioning technology would be speculative and completely counterproductive. Proceeding differently would contradict history itself. During the Apollo era, there was no moon treaty in place, yet humans landed on the moon's surface in 1969 because rather than preemptive international regulation, the global focus remained to be advancing engineer capabilities, not putting stones on the path. The scientific community at the time prioritized technological development, and this is something we should do also now. Don't we always say that history repeats itself and we should learn from history? Well, let's just do it, I would say. We are also aware that, for example, the Moon Agreement in 1979 was rejected by all major space power. As of 2025, none of the top space actors, US, China, Russia, India, Japan, is a members, we know it, have ratified it. However, it is clear that without major powers participating, we would be the greatest actors. A global framework is meaningless. That's why creating a new one is a waste of resources. We should draw from the ones already present. An international framework only works if major spacefaring nations join and comply. Yet, they have conflicting interests and have historically resisted external control. This means that establishing new frameworks is actually what we are rejecting. It is essential to recognize that the shortcomings of existing frameworks often stem from a lack of sufficient data, not from structural failure. For instance, our limited knowledge of asteroid composition is a fundamental challenge. In conclusion, our team has demonstrated there is no need to establish a new international framework. The existing institutions are adaptable, the technology is still evolving, and premature regulation would hinder progress. The position has failed to prove why new regulations are useful, given that Team Aluminium consider them just waste resources, time, money, effort. We urge you to stand with us and reject the resolution.
And finally, we'll hear from Affirmative 4 from Team Iron, who will begin their summary in the 4 minutes allotment.
I will start in 3, 2, 1. Honorable Chair, respected judges, and esteemed opposition. As the fourth speaker for the affirmative, it is my role to bring clarity and cohesion to our case and to leave you with no doubt that the motion an international body should establish a framework for the utilization of space minerals deserves your firm support. Our team has outlined a compelling vision not built on fantasy or fear, but on facts, logic, and historical precedent. We haven't just described the problem, we've provided a practical, effective, and equitable solution. Let's walk through the case we've built. The status quo is a recipe for conflict and inequality. Our first speaker outlined how the current legal framework, the Outer Space Treaty of 1967, is outdated and incomplete. It prohibits national sovereignty over celestial bodies, but says nothing about private or commercial extractions. This legal gray area is already being exploited. Some countries have passed national laws that grant private companies the right to mine asteroids and other celestial bodies. This is not innovation, it's an annexation through loopholes. We are already witnessing overlapping claims and conflicting interests, particularly between major space powers like the US and China. Without clear enforceable rules, we are heading straight towards chaos, conflict, and monopolization of resources that rightfully belong to humanity. A neutral international framework is the only way to prevent this outcome. Enforcement isn't a fantasy, it's a proven tool. The opposition may argue that international rules are meaningless if countries don't follow them. But this ignores how global governance actually works. As our second speaker demonstrated, enforcement in international law doesn't rely on military power, it relies on diplomatic, economic, and reputational pressure. Countries that violate global agreements face diplomatic isolation, loss of access to collaborative missions, economic consequences such as sanctions, and reputational damage that deters investors and partners. This system already works in other complex areas like the EAE governs nuclear collaboration and compliance. UNCLOS regulates ocean resources through the International Seabed Authority. The ICAO governs air travel across borders. The ITU ensures fair access to satellite orbits and radio frequencies. These models prove that large-scale enforceable cooperation is not only possible, it's already working. We can apply the same principles to space mining. So without a framework, the future of space is a monopoly. The opposition may also argue that a framework will lock out less developed countries, but the truth is not having a framework locks them out permanently. Right now, only a handful of countries and private companies have the resource to explore and extract space minerals. Without regulation, those early actors will monopolize technology, data, and prime resources zones. Yeah, but with a fair, inclusive framework, we can ensure universal access to mission data and technologies, equitable licensing, and revenue sharing mechanism to support emerging space programs. This framework doesn't freeze innovation, it unlocks it by creating trust, legal certainty, and global cooperation. It gives everyone a seat at the table. Let me briefly summarize the proposed framework. All nations participate equally, like in the UN. A blockchain-style registry ensures full transparency. Enforcement comes through exclusion, not force. Join and you gain tech, data, and influence. Stay out and you will fall behind. Also, if we start making rules after machines start mining, like the NEC2 suggested, the framework would take 20 to 30 years. So my final appeal is that honorable judges, this isn't just about space, it's about the future we choose. Do we let a few race unchecked for resources, or do we build a fair and peaceful system for all? Space mining is already happening. The real question is, will it be governed fairly or not at all?
Thank you.
Vote for affirmative. Thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations, everyone. Thank you very much. Andrew, Judge Andrew, would you like a couple of minutes before you offer your feedback and the winning team, or?
Yeah, thanks, moderator. I think it will take a couple minutes just to kind of summarize some of the
Thank you.
summarize some of the points. Yes.
Okay. Judge Andrew, is everything okay?
Oh, yeah. So I was sorry there, one. I'm just kind of finishing up here.
Okay, thank you.
Oh yeah, no, give me let's give me one. No, because I've seen here. I've been thinking about this for about 10 minutes. Let me just do one more minute to finish
Okay.
up some point totals, and then
Yes.
let me give my decision here.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think I'm ready now. Yeah, like I said, my apologies as well. This was a very close debate. I had to add up all the scores as well. Okay, so let's say, as moderator, am I okay to give the rest of my feedback here, or do we need to do anything else?
No, we'll need your feedback. If you may please remain in the breakout room after the debaters.
Okay, so like I said, sorry everyone, just taking a little bit of time here. I ended up kind of just having to go through all the arguments here. It was a very close debate. The winning team basically won by 2 points at the end of this debate, for all the scores. So that's why I just said, just to let everyone know, right? I just wanted to double check everything. I tried to go through all the arguments, kind of go over it several times. I think both sides made a lot of good points. And like I said, this was definitely one of the longer decisions I've had to make, because I did try to, like I said, go through everything here. It's a very close debate. I went back and forth several times here. I think at the end of this debate, I'm going to vote affirmative. So as I said, and like I said, this is a very close debate. So let me go through my decision making kind of here for everyone. So, and then like I said, if there's any questions at the end, you can feel free to just jump in quick too. So for this debate, I think both sides do need to do a little bit better job in the future, right? If you continue debating, you do need to work on some of your impacts. So like we talk about like in debate, just talking about what the actual consequences will be. Because that's why I had to kind of take a look here, because I kind of had to see what at the end of this debate both sides were actually saying, what were the actual consequences, right? Because there's a lot of talk about like prematurity, right? Like, should we do space regulations now or in the future? etc. Like, will great powers dominate now? How original, like, is the AF, right? Or how connected to the UN or existing bodies are they, or are they not? But I kind of needed, I think, again, for both sides, just to work on what are the actual consequences, or impacts of, these arguments. Because sometimes it was, again, like a little confusing, for me as a judge, right? Trying to go through here and say what, like, again, if it's a prematurity, right? Or like if, space regulation, space mining are very new things. Well, is there a problem of doing it now versus later? And what are the actual, economic consequences? Because there's a lot of, both sides just saying, it'd be useless or it'd be good, but I don't really have a full on impact as, to what these arguments are. So I just wanted to start by kind of saying that as my first comment for both sides, affirmative, negative. That'd be something to work on, just making, this debate a little bit clearer for me as a judge to figure out what the actual impacts would be. So just again, just to kind of go through here, I did end up voting again affirmative, because I feel like the affirmative at the end of this debate does actually have the stronger impacts. I think the negative talks a lot about here, especially like in these middle speeches, right? Talking a lot about like the current science is too early and like we need to wait longer, right? There's a lot of talk about in the cross X's as well, right? In these cross examinations again about whether like we should do it now or later, how early is space mining at. And I think that's kind of a mistake by the negative in my personal opinion, because even again, I think this debate was close, but I think the negative spent too much time on this, because I think I do end up leaning affirmative after the affirmative rebuttal and a lot of these points, because I think it is true, like there's not really a huge impact. Like that's kind of what the terms I use. Like there's not really a huge disadvantage to doing it now. I'm not sure whether or not it is too early. I'm not really the negative. All they kind of say here, and I think it's not bad points, right? But the negative just kind of says it may or may not cripple innovation, like by regulating it this early. I'm not sure I really gain like again, like a clear impact or like a clear maybe like research, right? Or a clear example like of in the past of like, regulating something too early. And again, there might be some examples, there probably are, but I really just don't gain a clear example of like regulating something too early, crippled an entire industry, it never recovered, right? So at the end of this debate, I kind of do end up leaning, because the negative spends so much time on this, I kind of do end up agreeing with like the affirmative that I don't know if I do think that like this will absolutely cripple space mining, right? It'll kill the space industry. It'll kill SpaceX. It'll kill other countries and Russia, China, US investing in space. I'm not sure that I feel that that's such a big disadvantage that it outweighs the affirmative. For example, kind of actually turning that point, right? Or kind of taking that point away from you and saying, like in the third affirmative speech, actually talking about a lack of regulation actually creates a worse environment for innovation, because then it creates risky investments for these companies. I think they end up, I think the affirmative could have even focused on that point more, but I think just for the negative as advice, right, I think they end up kind of turning that point against you. I think that was something I would have liked to have seen addressed. I think the negative for the fourth speech, you do a very good job as well, but I think that's something, again, it's such a close debate, but that might have been something that might have persuaded me too, is talking a little bit more about that innovation point and, going against that. Because again, really, I just get that the biggest like disadvantage to the affirmatives plan is just that it's useless and like potentially economically harmful. Again, like innovation. But again, kind of at this debate, it's a little muddy. It's a little unclear what the actual impact of that is, besides, useless might be true, right? Like again, maybe you really don't need these beyond like the UN bodies, or you don't need these beyond like the Institute for Peace, or peace in space. Like these institutions may or may not be good enough already. But again, I just feel like at the end of this debate, the affirmative does make clear some of these points, right? Like, or they have at least the stronger and clear impacts and benefits. Like again, they talk about that lack of regulation might actually lead to worse innovation. They talk about they may or may not be able to sanction, but it does create a better peaceful environment in the status quo, right? That actually is an improvement, that countries will be more likely to share their data, share their, things across, these across countries and across private companies, because it will be a better environment where everything is more clear. There are more clear regulations going on. There are new laws there are clearer laws in place in general through this new body, exclusively or uniquely. So yeah, and like I said, I took a little bit of time, so I don't want to, go on too much further. I'll let everyone go here. I think that pretty much summarizes my thoughts here. So like I said, I think for both sides, that'd be something to work on, right? Is just making, clear for the affirmative, what at the end of this debate are your benefits? And then for the negative, right? What is your biggest disadvantage that, like, if the affirmative implements this plan, right? The world, not to be too extreme, but the world will collapse, right? Like space industry will collapse because of the affirmative plan. Just like, what are the steps, right? Like, what is your biggest benefit and what is your biggest disadvantage? Because like I said, even at the end of this debate, it was a little messy. Just again, kind of talking about like whether or not bureaucracy exists or not, is the space industry too early? I kind of, like I said, had to just go through this debate and find what I thought, were the biggest benefits, to this debate. And I had to kind of go on my shoulders here to figure out what just I thought were the biggest benefits and disadvantages presented. So like I said, just in summary, that's kind of where I ended up in this debate. Is I think the affirmative did end up with the clearest advantages. And like I said, maybe even turning the negative's biggest point about, like, it's redundant to do this, but they end up, like I said, the affirmatives end up kind of turning that a little bit by talking about the lack of new regulation might actually make innovation worse. So yeah, so again, great debate to both teams. Like I said, this was basically a 2-point, as well, kind of decision at the end of this. Very close debate. I think both sides did a very good job, though, overall, though, presenting their points and all this research and all these, historic bodies and the UN and all this and the kind of history of space travel. Yep. So with that, like I said, Owana, you can end it there as well, and the moderator. But like I said, good debate to both sides.
Thank you very much, Judge Andrew. Sorry, I want to tell you that the final virtual debate, the spUN tournament, is scheduled to be streamed into the NSS International Space Development Conference, the ISDC, in Orlando, Florida, on Saturday, June 21 at 8:30 Pacific Daylight Time. This debate will be streamed out on NSS YouTube and NSS Facebook. We will hope to see you there. You will see an announcement of the ISDC competition team soon after the last debate round on Sunday, June 8th. And also, please mark your calendars for Saturday, July 12, 2025, 8 a.m. CT for the spUN Program Awards event. And we will use the same Zoom link as today, the one that I just put in the chat. I want to tell you that it was great. You did an excellent job, everyone, and thank you for participating in the 2025 spUN debate tournament. Judge, please be sure to remain in the breakout room after the debaters depart. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you.
Goodbye. Thank you.